Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this event that we've put together here at Brasenose College for International Women's Day. My name's Kirsty Gunn. I'm the Royal Literary Fellow here at Brasenose, and it's my great pleasure to introduce author, journalist, and critic Sarah Gristwood, who's here to talk about her amazing book, Secret Voices, a year of women's diary entries. It's just the most fantastic celebration of women's lives and women's writing, moments being snatched in the middle of a busy day and recorded and celebrated. We're going to have a lovely little time together, Sarah and I. I'm going to talk briefly about what I think of as a companion volume to Sarah's beautiful book, Such a Sweet Singing, which is a volume of poetry by women, for women, about women's lives. But first of all, before we get on to the event itself, I just want to thank our wonderful director of the Senior Common Room here at Brasenose College, Professor Carol Brunn-Taylor, who's made this whole event possible and who is not only going to be making it available for members of college here, but across all the colleges at Oxford. So thank you again, Brasenose, for making this happen. And Sarah, welcome. Sarah, this is such an amazing volume. Might you talk a little to us about what you think it does, how you came to put it together, and then share some of the entries with us?
Okay, indeed. Or perhaps I should almost begin by looking at what women wrote today, at what we now know as International Women's Day, though of course that's a more modern invention. I think I had 3 entries for that day, and one of them is remarkably brief and to the point, from Beatrice Webb in 1885. Work is the best of narcotics, provided the patient be strong enough to take it. And yes, absolutely, don't we all agree? There's one very telling one, I feel. It's from Mary Shelley, the poet's wife, of course, and Frankenstein author, in 1815. Finish Rinaldi, talk with Shelley, in very bad spirits, but get better. Sleep a little in the day, in the evening not. It's, on the face of it, an unrevealing entry, unless you've been reading the previous days and know that, in fact, one of the previous entries said, found my baby dead. Hog came, read so-and-so, read so-and-so. And these remarkably terse entries that suggest at that point she's trying to curb her feelings, that she feels, it's not legitimate, if you like. She said at one point, it's foolish, I know, but I can't help thinking about my baby. It's hard indeed for a mother to lose a child. Well, today, I think, we're surprised by the terseness rather than by her feeling. But I think that's quite revealing. And one thing I noticed about Mary Shelley was that after her husband's death, his sudden death, of course, in that boat accident, then she didn't write for a few weeks, few months even, as new widows tend not to. But when she began again, the entries might have been written by a different woman. They're enormously long, enormously loquacious. Anyhow, the 3rd entry on that day is from Virginia Woolf, who's one of my all-time favourites. 1941, so of course, the Second World War. She's just come back from Brighton, where her husband Leonard's been giving a speech. She says it's like a foreign town the first spring day. Women sitting on seats, a pretty hat in the tea shop. How fashion revives the eye. And the shell-encrusted old women, rouge-decked, cadaverous at the tea shop. She's determined, she says, not to be introspective here. I mark Henry James' sentence, observe perpetually, observe the income of age, observe greed, observe my own despondency. Of course, as we now know with hindsight, we're not very far before her suicide. But by that means, she says, the despondency, becomes serviceable, or so I hope. I insist upon spending this time to the best advantage. I will go down with my colours flying. She's setting out possibilities for herself. Suppose I bought a ticket to the museum, biked in daily and read history. Suppose I selected one dominant figure in each age and wrote round and about. Occupation is essential. And now, with some pleasure, I find that it's 7 and must cook dinner. Haddock and sausage meat. I think it is true that one gains a certain hold on sausage and haddock by writing them down. And to me, in a way, I guess those 3 entries, quite by chance, sum up what I was thinking about women's diaries in a way, because it is the mixture of the profound or profoundly moving and the everyday. Haddock and sausage meat, as she says, though I have to admit, every time I read that, I can't but think, odd combination? Anyway, perhaps cooking was not Virginia Woolf's major skill.
Sarah, thank you so much. That was just a wonderful kind of little taster of this glorious book, which gives us just such a host of voices and experiences. And as you say, that kind of random contingency, mixing all parts of life together.
Mm,
There it is on the page, gathered
mm,
together in these daily entries. What was your kind of favorite thing about putting together this project? What was your overall kind of
mm.
impression that you got
Yes,
from these women, and what was the
I
most delicious?
I think the sense of familiarity. Heaven knows there's huge surprise there. I mean, there's some real and some awful adventures in the pages. There's the Inuit woman, Ada Blackjack, who wound up as the sole survivor of an Arctic expedition, writing there unbelievably. There's obviously a number of diarists of people we now know, we remember as Holocaust victims. There's Anne Morrow Lindbergh writing after the kidnap and death of her baby son. But it was for me, I think, the real revelation was the sense of familiarity. Because a number of times there were dilemmas that we think of as very modern ones for women being voiced by women from 200 years ago or more, like Elizabeth Fry, the Quaker and prison reformer, writing 2 centuries ago about how she worried that her life with her husband and children was distracting her from her vocation, her career effectively. Well, how to combine work and family. Or writing after the birth of one of her children, the difficulty she had after a very hard labour in bonding with the baby. The term postnatal depression would not have been a familiar one in that century, but the feelings one we recognise today. And I think, although we're vaguely aware that women in the past would have had many of the same feelings, I didn't expect to find them voiced quite so clearly.
Thank you. It's a very beautiful volume. It's very
Wow.
beautiful to touch and hold and to move one's way through it.
Mm.
And the overall sense and impression we get is of something very gracious with loads of time around it, as though a woman's life might have, as part of it, a room of her own with a desk and a pen and a nice piece of paper.
Mm.
Can you give us a little insight as to your own writing methods? You're an extremely busy woman. You're juggling a lot of balls. What does your own writing desk look like, Sarah?
Oh, well, when I was doing this book, it was me buried somewhere behind an immense pile of volumes and half the contents of the London Library, basically. But no, because of the format of the book going through each day of the year, I wound up, of course, making lists of the entries I found for each day and then trying to make a selection while cursing the fact that unaccountably everybody seemed to have written on, say, August the 12th and practically nobody on August the 13th. You know, I caught myself thinking, I mean, I suppose I couldn't cheat just a little, but no, of course I couldn't.
Well, I didn't have quite the same challenges when I was putting together my volume of poems by women,
Yeah.
excuse me, for women, a volume that I divided up into sections such as home, family, imagination. And just by way of a companion to your beautiful reading, I'd like to read a poem by Evan Boland called The Pomegranate. The only legend I've ever loved is the story of a daughter lost in hell and found and rescued there. Love and blackmail are the gist of it, Ceres and Persephone the names. And the best thing about the legend is I can enter it anywhere and have. As a child in exile in a city of fogs and strange consonants, I read it first. And at first, I was an exiled child in the crackling dust of the underworld, the stars blighted. Later, I walked out in a summer twilight, searching for my daughter at bedtime. When she came running, I was ready to make any bargain to keep her. I carried her back past white beams and wasps and honey-scented buddleias. But I was Ceres then, and I knew winter was in store for every leaf on every tree on that road, was inescapable for each one we passed, and for me. It is winter, and the stars are hidden. I climb the stairs and stand where I can see my child asleep beside her teen magazines, her can of Coke, her plate of uncut fruit. The pomegranate, how did I forget it? She could have come home and been safe and ended the story, and all one's heart broken, searching. But she reached out a hand and plucked a pomegranate. She put out her hand and pulled down the French sound for apple and the noise of stone, and the proof that even in the place of death, at the heart of legend, in the midst of rocks full of unshed tears ready to be diamonds, by the time the story was told, a child can be hungry. I could warn her. There is still a chance. The rain is cold. The road is flint-colored. The suburb has cars and cable television. The veiled stars are above ground. It is another world. But what else can a mother give her daughter but such beautiful gifts in time? If I defer the grief, I will diminish the gift. The legend will be hers as well as mine. She will enter it as I have. She will wake up. She will hold the papery, flushed skin in her hand, and to her lips, I will say nothing. I just think this has been a day to celebrate women, women writing, women imagining, women thinking. It's been such a pleasure to read with Sarah Gristwood from her amazing book, Secret Voices, A Year of Women's Diaries. Sarah, can you finish this lovely session we've had together by reading perhaps one of your more favorite entries?
I will, but let me also just say how beautiful your book looks as well, with these amazing, amazing illustrations in it. I don't know if you, well, you know them, but if everybody else can see them, they should do. And I love the fact that your book is also meant to be used, isn't it? Not just to be read as a kind of out there piece of art, but actually to become a tool in people's lives. Okay, my favourite diarist has to be Nella Last. We know her from TV as Housewife 49, writing for the Mass Observation Project through the Second World War and after. I reflected, this is March the 14th, I reflected tonight on the changes the war had brought. I always used to worry and flutter around when I saw my husband was working up for a mood, but now I just say calmly, really, dear, you should try and act as if you were a grown man and not a child of 10. And if you want to be awkward, I shall go out alone. I told him he'd better take his lunch on Thursday, and several times I've not had tea quite ready when he's come in. I felt quite unconcerned. He told me rather wistfully that I was not so sweet since I'd been down at the centre. And I said, well, who wants a woman of 50 to be sweet anyway? And besides, I suit me a lot better. And I just love that. Housewife, 49, discovering herself through the war that took women out of the home, but also, I think, through the process of writing this diary.